This story isn't written in books, but it's whispered in every port between Kingston and Cartagena. The Argent Wind sailed once in 1814. A clean, fast brig. Good crew, paid well. She never made it back, but the ship didn't vanish. She drifted into port 6 days late, with no captain, no log, and the crew? Let's just say they weren't talking anymore. The Argent Wind left Havana in early August 1814 under British papers. Officially, she carried cotton, medical cargo, and iron tools. Unofficially, the first mate had been seen paying coin to 3 armed men the night before. They loaded something into the cargo hold, heavy, crated, marked with red wax seals. The men wore no uniforms, no names, and they left before dawn. The captain, Elias Dane, former Royal Navy, now freelance, didn't speak of it. But the crew felt it, and whispers started before they were out of sight of land. By the second night, sailors started avoiding the main hold. They claimed they heard chains shifting down there, even though the crates hadn't moved an inch. One man, Callum Knox, swore he heard breathing. He slept with a knife after that, then stopped sleeping altogether. 3 young deckhands, curious and drunk, tried to pry open one of the sealed crates. They didn't get far. Before the lid cracked, the captain appeared, gun drawn. He didn't speak. He just looked at them, and they backed away. That night, the 3 were reassigned to night watch near the rudder. They were never seen again. Some say they jumped, others say they were used to replace whatever was in the crate. On the 4th day, one of the crates was gone. Instead, there was a man locked in the ship's brig, below deck, naked, sunburned, eyes wide, hands shaking. He said nothing. When asked where he came from, he just said, "I tried to warn them." He died that night. No wounds, no noise. From the 5th night onward, the ship was followed by a strange wall of fog. It didn't drift. It followed. The crew turned south to avoid it. The fog followed. They fired a flare. It vanished into the mist. Then the captain changed course, unannounced. He gave no orders. Just went below deck. And never came up again. With no captain, the first mate took over. But he didn't last 2 days. Found in his cabin, face down, with seawater in his lungs. The windows had been shut. By the time the Argent Wind reached Cartagena, the men who were still alive barely looked human, salt-burned skin, blank eyes, refused to speak. They were paid off quietly, each man left alone. Most were dead within the year. The crates were offloaded in the dead of night. No paperwork, no record. One dock worker said the crates smelled of copper and gunpowder. But the one thing everyone remembered: as the ship was towed to dock, a sailor was heard muttering on repeat, "It's not gone. We just carried it too far." They thought the ship was cursed. They were wrong. The curse was already inside them. The Argent Wind was unloaded quietly in Cartagena, but the crates were never recorded. No customs, no logs. The harbor master who oversaw the arrival, Miguel Echevarria, resigned 2 days later and left the city without collecting his pay. When asked why, he said, "It's not the ship I'm afraid of. It's who wanted it to arrive." The surviving crew was scattered. Most disappeared into the taverns of the Caribbean, never to be seen again. But 2 of them, the boatswain Hendricks and the cook named Tobar, showed up weeks later in Kingston. They looked sick, hollow-eyed. Hendricks tried to confess at the Church of St. Thomas, but he died during the sermon, choking on his own tongue. Tobar was found 2 days later at the bottom of the harbor, his pockets filled with Spanish coins dated 50 years too early. But this part of the story doesn't end with the crew. It begins again with a man named Rourke, Thomas Rourke, a former Navy cartographer turned freelance navigator. He had never sailed on the Argent Wind, but he knew the route it took. In fact, he had drawn it. In late 1813, he was hired by a man calling himself G. Denton to chart a path from Havana to a small cove off the Venezuelan coast, unmarked, shallow, and mostly forgotten. Rourke had assumed it was for smuggling sugar or rum. But the strange part was this. The man demanded the route avoid all major shipping lanes, keep to shadowed waters, and most importantly, pass directly by a certain patch of sea northeast of Isla de Providencia. That area had no name, no shoals, no reefs, but sailors avoided it, not because of storms or pirates, because they said compasses spun there, and the air felt like copper. Rourke thought it nonsense, but he marked it anyway. 2 months after the Argent Wind disappeared, Rourke received a letter with no signature. It read, "You charted what you shouldn't have. You'll hear the anchor drop before they come." Then silence. No follow-up. Just that. 3 nights later, anchored off a quiet inlet near Port Royal, Rourke awoke to the sound of chains, thick, heavy, dragging across the deck above. But he was alone. The boat hadn't moved. No crew, no other ships in sight. Just the sound of an anchor lowering into water that didn't ripple. Rourke vanished the following week. His charts, however, did not. They were found in his rented room, wrapped in oilskin, marked with precise red lines. One of the notes in the margin read, "Cargo not meant for land. Destination, not a place, but a depth." A year later, a merchant captain claimed he saw the Argent Wind off the coast of Barbados. But it didn't respond to hails. It didn't turn. And in the spyglass, he swore. The sails were torn, but the hull was bone dry. They say smuggling is about gold, guns, spices. But not always. Sometimes a ship isn't hired to deliver something. It's hired to carry it as far from the world as possible. And when that world forgets, the sea remembers. No one ever found the crates. No one ever saw the captain again. But somewhere in the Caribbean, sailors still lower their voices when the fog thickens. Because they say the Argent Wind didn't sink. It's still out there, empty, sailing the same cursed route, carrying a cargo no port would ever accept.